Pleasure to introduce the first speaker of this morning section. So, Raphaël Danchon from University of Paris 12.
Yeah.
And he's going to talk about a Lagrangian approach for solving models of fluid dynamics in critical space.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the invitation. And thank you for the weather, because you cannot escape outside. So, where is the... it's here. Okay, so I will start with something which is quite general. So, okay. So something which is quite general and that you probably know well is that many partial differential equations may be shaped this kind of shape. I mean, you have something quite general, a system of equations, and after some transformation, then you may solve it, you may transform it into a fixed point problem of this type. I mean, the first term accounts for the data and maybe computed by starting from initial data and some linearization of the initial system. And then you put as a second term some nonlinear terms. So very often you have something which looks like that, is that the nonlinear terms are in fact quadratic. Okay, and so if they are quadratic, and if you can find some Banach space, X, in which this bilinear map is continuous, then you may attempt to apply Banach fixed point theorem to solve the problem, and you will get indeed a solution, provided that this smallness condition is satisfied. So this smallness conditions is a relation between the strength of the nonlinearity and the size of the data once it has been evolved by a suitable linearization of the system. So of course you may do that, you may play this game in the case where the nonlinearity is more general. Whenever you can get some continuity result in a Banach space, then this kind of approach is likely to work. So typical examples are, of course, a Navier-Stokes equation that may be reshaped in that way, thanks to the Stokes operator semigroup. Okay, you have the convection term is indeed quadratic, and then by using the Stokes equation, that is exactly the same equation but without the nonlinear term, and it's well known that it defines a semigroup. And then, at least formally, this system is equivalent to this, and you think that it's exactly in this shape. Okay, so this is one first important point that I will address in my talk. And the second point is that this kind of approach is particularly efficient if you can find a space which has the same characteristic as the system itself as regards some transformations that leave the system invariant. For example, typical transformation that you may find for systems coming from physics are dilations with respect to the space variable or time variable. And then what I mean is that in many systems, you may find some exponents alpha, beta, and gamma, so that whenever V is a solution with initial data V0, then this transformed function is also a solution, provided you change the data accordingly. Okay? So this, so when you have both, I mean when both the system has some scaling invariance and maybe recasted as a fixed point problem, then you can get quite nice results. Typically, you can get existence with small data, global existence with small data, local existence with large data, and so on. Okay, so just a definition. In the usual terminology, when you can find a space X which has the same scaling invariance, well, I mean, the norm is invariant for all lambda, but the transform that leaves the system invariant, you call the space critical, just a terminology. And then also another point is that okay, X is in fact a solution space. Now, once you know the solution space, how can you find the space for initial data? Well, you just ask the initial data to be such that once that it has been evaluated into by the linear equation, by the linearized equation, then the corresponding solution is in X. So in order to make this more precise, well, so this kind of approach has been used a lot recently for different sorts of nonlinear equations, typically nonlinear wave equations, nonlinear Schrödinger equations, KdV equations, and so on. Here, we are more interested by fluid mechanics. So in fluid mechanics, it gave impressive result for the Navier-Stokes equation, incompressible Navier-Stokes equation, which may be written that way. So let me recall a few results for that, which are based on this approach. So first, how can you find critical specials for Navier-Stokes equation? Well, you just observe that the system is invariant by this kind of transform. I mean, if you dilate the space variable by lambda, then you have to dilate the time variable by lambda square, and also change u by lambda u. And there is no pressure any longer here because I decided to project on the set of divergence-free vector fields. Okay, this kind of approach works perfectly well, provided you are in the whole space. And if you are in a domain, it's a bit more complicated, but still the same kind of ideas may give good results. And so, of course, in this case, the data have to be chosen in a space which has this kind of invariance. Okay, so there are well-known examples in which you can do that. So the first example, historical example, is due to Fujita and Kato. So in fact, here in the examples, I cheated a little because originally the results were not exactly stated in that way. For example, Fujita and Kato work not in the whole space, but in the bounded domain. But nevertheless, if you're interested by questions of regularity, Fujita Kato assumed that you had, they were in dimension 3, and dimension 3, they assumed that they had alpha derivative in L2, in some sense. So if you are in the whole space, it corresponds to the homogeneous Sobolev space with index dimension over 2 minus 1. So this is a space for initial data. And then you may solve the equation in this space X, okay, where you keep continuity in time with respect to the space where you put the initial data. And you also have a gain of one derivative if you perform L2 type integration in time. So for these those kind of results, the typical result that you get just from the fixed point argument is global existence for small data and local existence for large data. So later on, other examples of spaces that work in that way have been found. For example, Lebesgue space. And later, more complicated base of spaces, which are in fact a natural generalization of the result by Fujita and Kato. I mean that Fujita and Kato assumed that they had n over 2 minus 1 derivative in L2. And here, I don't want to give the exact definition of base of space, but the idea is that you have n over p minus 1 derivative in LP. So it's a quite natural generalization of Fujita and Kato result. Okay, so what I want to do today is to, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I do the scaling, I get the same critical space. While we know Borges is a global existence, and space, natural space, basically with infinity, because you have maximum principle. So that's where am I correct in saying that, or am I wrong?
Well, I mean, critical is a usual terminology, so I will not change it. So it's a kind of habit of use. And also, critical means that you cannot expect to go below by this kind of techniques. Okay, so sometimes, for example, in the example of KdV equation, you cannot get to the critical exponent. But this is a lower bound, let us say. Okay, so what I want to do today is to try to adapt this method to a more elaborate system in fluid mechanics. So I chose to present those two ones that I will copy on the blackboard. So the first one is still something which is incompressible. Okay, it describes the evolution of incompressible fluid, which is viscous, but that may have non-constant density. Okay, so it's perfectly reasonable from a physical point of view. So this is the first one. Okay, so on the blackboard I would just put a slightly simpler way where the viscosity is a constant. Okay, and the second one, so this is a system for incompressible fluid with non-constant density, and the second system is a simplification of the full Navier-Stokes equations for a compressible fluid. By simplification is here is that I assume that the pressure depends only on the density, and that I don't have any temperature equation, for example, even if it's possible to make it more general, but well, as I don't have so much time, this simpler system will be enough. Okay, so the two systems looked almost the same. The main difference is that in the first case, the pressure function is a Lagrange multiplier corresponding to the divergence-free constraint. And in the second case, the pressure is a given function. So I just want to finish the copy of this. So first thing that we have to try is to see if there is any notion of critical space. That is, first, there is any notion of scaling invariant transformation here. So, in fact, you may compute that quite easily, at least for the first system. For the first system, it's clear that if you change, if you use exactly the same kind of transformation as before for the velocity, I mean, you use a parabolic scaling for the time and space variable, and then the dilation by lambda for u. Okay, so it will work, provided that you do also parabolic scaling for the density, but with no lambda. Okay, and concerning the pressure, you have to put a lambda square, exactly like for the usual incompressible Navier-Stokes equation. So this perfectly works for the first system. For the second one, it's a bit different because the pressure law is given. So that if you do this transform, then in fact you change the pressure law. Nevertheless, we'll see that to some extent the pressure term is low order. So if you are just interested by local existence, in some sense you may neglect the pressure in these kind of considerations. Okay, so based on that, we see that space for initial data should have this kind of scaling invariant, which means that you see that as there are no lambda for the density, it means that in some sense you have to work at the same level of regularity for the velocity and the gradient of the density. Not the density, but the gradient of the density. Okay, now is it possible to write those two systems in this shape, at least formally? Well, here it's clear that there is some problem. I will, due to the fact that the first equation is hyperbolic. Okay, typically, well, you may recast the system that way. Okay, you may construct some operator B which does something like that, except that you will not be able to apply the fixed point theorem for this reason. You will have a problem at the level of contraction. I mean that if you assume that you are given two solutions, I will do the computation for the first system, because for the first system, in fact, this term, due to the divergence-free condition, this term is equivalent to that. Okay, so if you consider two solutions, rho 1, U1, and rho 2, U2, and when proving contraction, in fact, is more or less equivalent to prove stability estimates. And that what will happen is that, so this is something which is well known, is that when you try to prove directly stability estimates in hyperbolic equations of first order, then you lose at least one derivative. And the loss of derivative is precisely here, because you have some gradient, and you cannot expect to gain back this lost derivative, because on the left-hand side, you just have a transport equation. Okay, so at first sight, it seems impossible to use a fixed point theorem to solve this kind of systems. However, if you look at the literature on the people that first studied, tried to solve the Cauchy problem for the first one, I don't know, but for the second one, I'm sure that the first worked. What they did, they used, in fact, Lagrangian coordinates. Okay, so why Lagrangian coordinates seems to be nice in this problem? Just because here it's perfectly clear that if you follow the flow, then the density is going to be time independent. Okay, which means that in Lagrangian coordinates, you can expect that you don't have to consider any longer the equation for the density, as it's just given by the initial data, it's time independent. So you just have to concentrate on the second equation. So of course, if you look at the second equation, then by doing a change of coordinates, you will get something which looks a bit ugly in those two terms. But nevertheless, let's try to do that. Okay, so I introduce the flow. What time is it? Okay. So I introduce the flow of V. Okay. Then I change Eulerian coordinates Tx into Lagrangian coordinates Ty in the following way. Okay, I put bar on all items when I am in Lagrangian coordinates, and x when it's Eulerian coordinates. And then what happens for differential operators? So for example, if you have some scalar function value in R, but just by using a chain rule, it's clear that you have this blue term, you have this equality, this is just the chain rule. But there is also something which is interesting, because it will give you more flexibility, is that you may choose to write these terms in a completely different way, which in some sense it's kind of use of covariant derivatives. Okay, you can put, you can write also this in this way. And here you will see that you have to make use of the Jacobian of the transformation. So in particular, in the first case, where you have divergence U equals 0, so the flow is measure preserving, so this is 1. Okay, it means that you don't have this term J here and here. Okay, so I will use, in fact, we will see later on that having these two ways of writing the differential operators will give you more flexibility, and in some cases it will be nice to use the blue shape, and in other cases the red one. So now what happens for the material derivative, which was the main motivation for introducing Lagrangian coordinates? Well, everything goes well, at least if you are incompressible. Then, for example, here, if you put as Z the density, you will find that the density is time dependent, as expected. And even in the compressible case, you will still get something. You will get that not the density, but the density times J is time independent. Okay, so to start with, I will work on that system. And then I perform all the transformations, and I end up with this kind of equation, with this system. So you see that now you have only one equation for the velocity. There is some nice features. For example, okay, the density is time independent, so here you may replace rho bar with rho 0, initial density. And there's something which are not so nice. I mean, the divergence-free constraints became more complicated here. It's no longer, now it's, the coefficients here depend on the solution itself. And here, the second order terms looks very bad, but you still know something. You still know that at time t equals 0, this is parabolic, or not exactly parabolic, but at time t equals 0, this is just a Stokes equation. Okay, and something else which is nice is that you may completely forget the initial problem and express everything in terms of the velocity field in Lagrangian coordinates. Okay, so let's work with that. And the first attempt is to, if we are interested in, let's say, global existence results for small perturbations of zero data, then the first thing to try is to look at the linearization of this about 0, and you get the usual Stokes system, except that here you have the divergence constraint is non-zero. Okay, if you compute what it is, it's exactly this, and also you have some right-hand side f here. Okay, so to go further in the computations, let me, where is the... Okay, so what do we want to do finally? So the initial motivation was to use, to be able to solve this in a critical spaces thanks to the fixed point theorem. So what we have to do finally is to find a critical framework. Okay. A second important condition is that at the end, we will like to be able to resume to the initial system in Eulerian coordinates, which means that you have to be able to make all those computations rigorous. And if you look at what happens almost everywhere, maybe on the previous slide here, you see that something which is very important is the gradient of the flow, which means that you need to have some information on L1 in time gradient of V. Okay? And at every level, a condition which turns out to be very important is that you really need gradient of U to be L1 in time, at least locally, with values in L infinity. And the first thing that you have to realize if you want to solve the problem is that here you see that you have a Stokes equation with a right-hand side, f, which contains terms which are the same order, same number of derivatives of the left-hand side. Okay? So you have to be able to consider f like dtu containing some one-order time derivative, and also maybe it's less easy to see it, but you will at some point you have also second-order derivative of u. Okay, so in other words, we have to be able to say, okay, I have f in some space x, then I need that the three terms in the left-hand side have the same regularity as f and maybe controlled by f. So this kind of result is called maximal regularity. Okay, so can we find spaces where you have the three properties? Okay, if you can find a space X which has the three properties, then you have a good chance to solve the problem. So let me first look at the second one. What does it mean? So the second one, okay, let me look at the simpler case of just the heat equation. Okay, heat equation with data, with no source term, and data U0. So this condition exactly means, well, at least if here you put infinity, so this condition means that you need this integral to be finite. Okay? And it turns out that it's an equivalent definition to a well-known space, which is a Bezoff space. We refer index 1. This Bezoff space is B minus 1, infinity 1. Okay? You may take that as a definition if you like. Okay, so you see that you have a chance to use this approach only if your space, initial space, is embedded in this Bezoff space. Now, if we look at maximal regularity. So maximal regularity, again, I will do it for heat equation to simplify. Like this. And with data 0, to simplify also. So what we want is a space X which has this kind of properties. Okay, so there are many examples of spaces which have this kind of properties, which are spaces like this, LP in time and LQ in space. But you have some limitation, and one of the limitations is that you cannot take P to be 1. Okay, and this is very bad because if you are interested by, you see that clearly this condition is a L1 in time condition. Okay, so if you start to use at this point a LP in time condition with a P greater than 1, then at some point you will have to use Hölder inequality, and then you will lose the power of T, and then it will be very difficult to prove a global result, global time result. So in fact, as far as I know, the only possibility, I'm not an expert of this kind of result, but as far as I know, the only way of having P equal 1 is to use not a Lebesgue space here, but again a Bezoff space with third index 1. Okay, so a candidate space would be finally a Bezoff space with a last index 1. And now what for the critical framework which is here? Okay, so now we see that we don't have so much freedom because due to that and also to that, we need to use a Bezoff space with last index 1. And now if you look at the scaling of the equation, you see that the only possibility is n over P minus 1. And for the time being, P may be any exponent between 1 and infinity. Okay. So now let me analyze this Stokes equation. So as we are in the whole space, in fact, you may get rid of, well, at least in the case where divergence U is equal 0, you can get rid of the pressure, and then the problem is in fact equivalent to the heat equation. So it's equivalent to what I wrote. So it's once at least you got rid of G. So in order to get rid of G, well, what is natural is that, okay, you split U into a divergence-free part, W, and something which will, divergence-free part is V, and something which will take the G into account. So you have to solve this equation. There are many ways of solving this equation, but in the whole space, the easiest way is probably, at least formally, to write that W is in this shape, and then you plug in the equation, and you find that V solves Stokes equations with the usual homogeneous constraint for the divergence, and with some right-hand side here. And so what is natural is to impose on G conditions that make this red term to have the same regularity as f. So here you have two terms in this return. There is one term involving a time derivative and one term involving a gradient, okay, space gradient. And so you see that, okay, if we work with these Bezier spaces, what is natural, like the natural assumption that gradient of G is L1 in B minus 1, and that, for example, dt of G is divergent of some vector field which also has the same regularity, then here you will have gradient of Laplacian minus 1 of divergent of this. This is a zero order operator, and then it will not change the regularity, so it's natural to ask for R to be here. And at the end, you get this inequality. Okay, so let me now resume to the nonlinear problem, which is this one. Okay, what is G in our case? So the G is a non-homogeneous part of the divergence, okay? So in our case, G is like this. And what is A? A is the inverse of the gradient of the flow. The gradient of the flow is given by this relation. And now we have to, in fact, okay, we have to estimate gradient of G in a space with this index of regularity, which is equivalent to estimate G in a space with n over p regularity. And now there is another nice feature of this Bezier space, is that it's an algebra. Okay? And as it's an algebra, in order to inverse gradient of x, you may just use this series expansion. And at the end, okay, you see that you have a linear type estimate for identity minus A, which gives a quadratic estimate for G. Okay, and all this is correct as far as this rate term is small enough. Okay, maybe I didn't write. Okay, the rate term has to be small enough. It's small enough. Then, okay, you have a quadratic estimate for the gradient of G. Now, we have to remember that we also need some information on the time derivative of G. And it will be good to be able to express dtg like this. Now, if you look at the expression of G and take time derivative, it seems to be ugly. It seems to be impossible. But at this point, you have to remember that there are two ways of writing divergence of U. Okay? Either you use the chain rule, or you can put the derivative outside. Okay? And then, now it's clear that if you use the second form, then indeed you have dtg equals divergence of something. And again, you can use the same kind of, you can take a time derivative of the expansion, and again, you get a quadratic estimate. Okay, so I don't have time to do that, but you have the same kind of estimates for the terms corresponding to that. And okay, so what I did here is that on the left-hand side, I wrote the linear part of the system, and on the right-hand side, I put all the nonlinear terms. So what is important that in all these linear terms, you have the red term, which is going to be small if the L1, okay, they are going to be small whenever this integral is small. So finally, you only have on the right-hand side you have only small terms, quadratic terms, in fact, except for this one. This one need not be small because this is, from science, it's linear with respect to U, but it involves the difference between the density on some reference density that I took to be 1, for example, but you may take any positive constant. So now it's clear that you may absorb this term, you may keep this term as the left-hand side, if you can make an assumption that says that this is small. And if you want this most general assumption, you just have to say, okay, I want 1 minus rho 0 to be in a space such that whenever I multiply 1 minus rho 0 by some function in this Bezier space, then I end up in the same Bezier space with a small norm. So this kind of space has a name. It's called a multiplier space. Okay, you may define a multiplier space for any Banach space, and this is exactly the definition of a multiplier space. It says that whenever you multiply 1 minus rho 0 by something in the Bezos space, you end up in the same one, and in addition, you have some inequality, which defines the multiplier norm. So now the natural condition is say, okay, I want this to be small in the multiplier space, and then the velocity to be small, and okay, I get a result, provided that I can make all this consistent with a fixed point argument. Okay, so I will be very fast for this part. So, okay, again, I start with my system in Lagrangian coordinates, except that I linearize it in that way. Okay, you see that here I change the u for v, which means that I assume that I am given some vector field v, and then I solve this linear problem. Okay, it may be done by quite standard techniques. And then the fixed point scheme would be that given v, a gradient of q, that in fact doesn't play any role here, then I construct u and gradient of p to be the solution of this linear system, Stokes-Lie system. And then by just adapting the estimates that I presented before, you may prove that you have stability over some small ball, and that you have contraction estimates, and then step 1 and step 2 give you existence of a solution, and also uniqueness in a small ball. In fact, you may have a uniqueness without smallness assertion just by modifying step 2 accordingly. Okay? And finally, you get this statement that I obtained a few years ago with Piotr Mucha, which said that, okay, so here I stated only the local in time, the global in time version. So global in time version, you have a smallness condition here, which is the usual one for the velocity, which says that the velocity in some critical space has to be small compared to the viscosity. And you also need the density to be close to 1, but in a norm which is quite weak, actually. It's a multiplier norm. And then you have a global solution. And in addition, the flow map is Lipschitz continuous. It's just a byproduct of the fact that you used Banach fixed point theorem to solve the problem. So it has interesting consequences. The second one, in fact, is interesting. Well, first consequence is that you can go back to the Eulerian coordinates and get a similar statement, except that you don't have a continuity of the flow map, but you still have uniqueness under this condition, which was not known before. Because here you see that if you take p equals to close to 2n, okay, you may have quite a negative exponent here, minus 1 over 2 almost. And an interesting consequence, which was not the first motivation for doing that, is that you may consider you don't need the initial density to be continuous. You may consider situations of this type. Okay, you have a fluid with, we have two fluids, a mixture of fluids, with some density ρ01 outside, inside some domain, and ρ02 outside. And what says this theorem is that you may consider such data. And so, of course, at the level of Lagrangian coordinates, well, the density is time independent, so okay, it will remain so for all time. And at the level of Eulerian coordinates, it means that this kind of situation is stable, and if the boundary is C1, then it will remain C1 for all time. Okay, so very quickly, a few words on the second situation. So you may do exactly the same with the second model, okay? Use Lagrangian coordinates. So as I told you before, of course, the density is no longer time independent, but this quantity is time independent, which means that if you put everywhere here j rho bar, you may change rho bar by j minus 1 rho 0, okay? And finally, you end up with only one equation for the velocity, which at least at time 0 is more or less parabolic. Okay, so it's a bit more complicated here, but at the same time, you don't have the divergence-free constraint, so it's good. And then you may try to implement a fixed point procedure in the same way, except that you see that, oh, there is a mistake here, no x. So what you have to solve, finally, on the left-hand side, I put some linearization of the system, which correspond to the operator at time 0, in fact. And this linearization is a kind of system of heat equations, which is sometimes called Lamé equation. Okay, so you have here, you have some functions of the viscosity are functions of rho 0. You need, in order to solve that, you need some ellipticity conditions, which is exactly that I gave initially. And then, okay, in the right-hand side, you have all the nonlinear terms, and you may check in Lagrangian coordinate that they are, at least at the first order, they are quadratic, okay, because all the terms in red are more or less like a gradient of V, integral of entire of gradient of V, and the other terms, all the terms in red, in fact, are more or less linear, so you see that you have only quadratic terms, except for this one, which comes from the pressure, but which is, in some sense, low order. Okay? I mean that if you are just interested by local time result, you will be able to kill it by some power of t. And it's okay. And then again, you may imagine some procedure to solve it, so some iterative scheme. So what, in fact, the main analysis here, well, the analysis of nonlinear terms is more or less the same as in the incompressible case. Okay? So the main question is how to solve this Lamé system. So simply the main statement, just a few that I will give at the end. So what I gave you here is not the Lamé system, it's something simpler, just a heat equation with non-constant coefficients. So what you can do by using Littlewood, Paley stuff, and so on, is to prove this kind of inequality, where here you need too much regularity. I mean that, remember that the density, these coefficients come from the density in a space like that, and here you have gradient of the density, so you have one more derivative, one more than expected. So you may cheat, in fact, and you may decompose the system that way. On the left-hand side, you put some low frequency cutoff, so that this term is very smooth. Okay? So for the left-hand side, you may apply the estimates of the smooth case, and the right-hand side, well, you have some terms that you may make as small as you want if you may take M large enough. And at the end, you get something that I don't have really time to present. I prefer to finish on the statement that you get at the end for the compressible Navier-Stokes equation, which is that one. Okay, so you start with exactly the same assumptions as for the incompressible equation, except that here you see that you don't need any smallness. You don't need any smallness. Why? Because for two reasons. First, we don't need any smallness. For the density, we just need to be bounded away from 0. And we don't need smallness for the velocity because here I decided to present only a local in time result. Okay, then the results say that in Lagrangian coordinates, you get a local solution in the expected space, functional space, which is the same one as before for the velocity. And for the density, you keep the initial regularity. And in addition, you have Lipschitz continuity of the flow map. So what I discovered after writing this result is that, in fact, it's more or less optimal. I mean that you may go back to Eulerian coordinates, and you will have the same statement, except for the continuity of the flow map. And it turns out that recently, Shen Liu and Zhang wrote a paper when they found that this condition is, in fact, optimal. If you go beyond the condition, that you have examples of data leading to ill-posedness. And also, just to mention, you may this is not a big deal to extend this kind of result for more complicated Navier-Stokes type equation. You may include a coupling with Poisson equation, if you like, or the full Navier-Stokes. Well, you have to change slightly the conditions here, but more or less, this is the same idea. Okay. Thank you for your attention.
Are there questions or remarks?